Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Sterk of Sterk Family Law, and I'm so excited to be here today with Dr. Kevin Dobrinsky at the Amen Clinics here in the Chicago area. And specifically today, we've got a great topic because we're going to talk about the biological components to marital discord. It's so fascinating because, Doctor, through the years, I have to tell you, no, I've done this for more than 30 years, family law, and I have seen personally in my cases the link between biological problems and marital discord, because there are problems that people are suffering and they don't identify them early enough, and then they end up in a divorce situation and it's just tragic. So I'm so excited to talk to you a little bit today about it. Can you first address what you do here and tell us about the Amen Clinics?
Sure. So at the Amen Clinics, we are a diagnostic model, and we refer to it as brain health. A lot of people look at the other side of it, and it's called mental health or behavioral health. So we see lots of conditions coming into our clinic, individuals that may have been diagnosed multiple times, they may have seen multiple physicians and be on multiple medications. And so the conditions could be anything from attention issues, depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injuries, cognitive decline, bipolar, schizophrenia, etc.
And you have seen through the years then that this causes marital discord.
Yes.
In a big way.
Yes.
Because if somebody is suffering and the other party doesn't understand, and that's really the first threshold, and it causes just major issues. So how is it that your services can provide something new or different?
Well, I think that part of the problem is, someone may have a label or a diagnosis such as, attention issues, right? Mm-hmm. ADD, so to speak. But sometimes the other spouse or sometimes that individual really doesn't understand about the biology of what that really means, that they're going to have impulsive issues, they're not going to be empathetic, they're executive center, meaning they're not going to be able to make good decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Making good decisions all the time. Right. And so this can affect every area of their life. Mm-hmm. But when they're able to come in, for instance, and we see this, so for instance, if we're doing objective data, we do brain spec imaging here, and we can actually show a couple that their spouse has attention issues, and here's the biological problem right here in their brain. There's a lot of sympathy that comes from the other spouse.
Sure. And then they might put in place and employ certain things that are criteria. So one spouse might take a different function on in the family. So for example, if somebody isn't making good decisions sometimes, and they recognize that, when you have the treatment, part of the plan for marital harmony is one spouse takes care of the economics, right? And you can do allocation of duties, fair?
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
And the other thing you could do within that structure is also have a plan. Listen, if you're having a struggle right now, I'm going to acknowledge that the other spouse saying, you're going through a tough time, let's call the doctor and let's get some help for this. Because I think it gives you a remedy. It gives you an alternative rather than letting that conflict brew, and blow up and cause eminent problems, right?
Right, yeah. It's interesting you talk about that. In some of these cases, obviously you have a lot of history of working with individuals, and until they really have something tangible to deal with instead of just labels, and they understand that, sometimes there's excuses. If someone has these attention issues we used before, maybe it's just an excuse, but now you've got this biological problem, there's a little bit more empathy, a little bit more sympathy, and then putting together some sort of game plan, as you talked about, as far as, let's set up situations where you're not going to have issues because, or with finances, let me take care of that if you're, whatever the reason may be.
Whatever it is. And it's not control in the relationship, it's a biological reason, and everybody understands what that standard is going to be. Now let's move to what I consider to be a really evolving crisis in America, is the gray divorce. So that 55 plus community of divorces, really 50 plus being the growing population for the divorces getting done. We can talk about a lot of the reasons, and I don't want to spend the time on that, but dementia and memory loss. So tell us a little bit about that, because when you first start seeing those issues, you may not accept it if you're on the other side. You may not know what to do with it if you're suffering it yourself, and you run from the problems rather than embrace and get the help. How can you help in that situation?
So I think the first really important thing is understanding what you're dealing with. We have a lot of individuals coming to our clinics that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. And after them struggling, the family's struggling because the outcomes aren't there, they've tried some things, it's not working, they come into our clinic, and when we use this objective spec imaging, we've seen a lot of cases of individuals diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and this is just one example, that an individual may have Lyme disease.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so that's the good news. The bad news is we told the
Right.
individual, you don't have Alzheimer's disease, you have Lyme disease. We treated the Lyme disease and their cognitive decline got much, much better. We also see this in what we call pseudo-dementia, which individuals have been diagnosed with dementia, but they come in and it's actually depression. So I think it's really important to get a thorough diagnosis with some objective data so you really just know what you're dealing with.
Now, let's say that your folks suffered from that, or at least that's what they were told, fair?
Right.
And you're fearful, and in the relationship you see some issues coming on. Is it a good idea for people to use this as not only a diagnostic tool, but also a prognosis? Am I going to get dementia or memory loss?
So we have a program here at the Amen Clinic called Memory Rescue, and essentially what we do is we look at the 11 risk factors associated with cognitive decline.
Okay.
One of those, if you do have family members and you're concerned either for yourself or your loved one that may have that, is first of all look at your genetics. Meaning we actually look at genetic markers, what we call SNPs.
Okay.
And one prominent one that basically points out that you could have an issue with Alzheimer's disease or dementia is what we call APOE4, APOE4. It's just a genetic marker. Now, the interesting thing about genetics is that our genetics are working all the time. This is not a death sentence, because there are things that we can do about it. So what can you do about it? Well, there's lots of things. Again, we look at the risk factors associated, but what if someone, first of all, they do have it, they've been diagnosed with it. One thing that we can use is something called hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Oh, tell us about that.
Okay, and so the whole idea behind hyperbaric oxygen therapy is that we want to make the blood going to the brain really nutrient dense, and oxygen is one of the, it's basically how our bodies work. And so basically hyperbaric oxygen therapy takes let's say an oxygen bubble about yay big, and makes it that small, and so we're super oxygenating this blood going to every area of the body, and so it heals a lot faster. And it can heal in which certain situations it wasn't able to heal because...
Interesting. And I'm assuming that's not just limited to the brain. It could be other areas as well.
No, it's, matter of fact, there's about a dozen different conditions which the FDA has approved for hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Interesting. And it's really non-invasive. It's just...
It's not invasive. You essentially, we have one here at our clinic. You lay down in what we call a soft chamber for about an hour. You can sleep, you can read, you can work on your computer or phone, and basically you just sit in there, and as the body is healing or the chamber is doing its work, basically you're doing something else. And it's ideal that you come in frequently in early stages. We recommend typically about 40 sessions, and so you want to be doing it throughout the week periodically.
It's very fascinating though, because here we have a treatment option that people don't even know about. They can do something about it, but imagine that couple that's struggling. You know, they're in that 50 plus community, maybe they're in their early 60s. You know, we've got life changes coming. They're empty nesters, they're getting ready for retirement. The fear of all of the economic consequences of that change, right? Maybe downsizing, and then this memory loss issue. And then marital discord comes right after. Fair?
Yeah.
And it's classic. It's a toxic situation. But the good news is that you guys are available and you can get this testing and try to figure out what's going on.
Right. And I think, too, is that we're looking at using some very conservative treatments to help people with cognitive decline. We're talking about things like exercise and very specific nutrients that we use in the form of supplements and diet, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, whereas you go through the general medical model and they're looking at medication. Well, I will tell you one statistic that will really shock you is that medications for Alzheimer's disease has a 99.6 failure rate.
Good Lord.
So I'm going to tell you something that may shock you, and this is the fact that the rate of success with medication for Alzheimer's disease is a 99.6 failure rate.
Unbelievable.
They just do not work. In fact, to make it even worse, some of the medications that they're using is actually speeding up the process of cognitive decline.
And they're sitting, people are in a doctor's office. They don't question, they don't bring a list of questions. They take the information that they get from their doctor and they simply take it. If my doctor prescribed it, it must be good for me. Everybody, we need to start thinking outside of the box. We need to take our own initiative, figure out what's available options, and get that diagnosis and look at the other objective standards. So what a great opportunity for people.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, you have to take personal responsibility. And just because you're going to see a physician it doesn't mean that that's the only route, right?
Right.
Treatment. There are multiple, treatment options, and you have to start investigating those.
And not only are there multiple treatment options in the medical field or for memory loss, as a family law practitioner, I'm going to tie this into what we do. There's multiple options for your family crisis. And that's the message that Sterk Family Law wants to get to people. That's our resource center, and that's what we're doing here today. It may not be that simple issue. It may be that your spouse has a brain tumor. It may be dementia. It may be that Lyme disease. It could be a lot of different options that are available. And that treatment and looking at that issue when you reach especially that gray divorce, it's critical. And so when you come into our office, we're going to try to give out those resources to say, consider these options, including but not limited to what we're talking about today. But thinking outside of the box, wouldn't you say that's the best message we can leave people with today?
It really is. Take more responsibility and don't just accept a diagnosis. There's things that you can do.
Absolutely. So we wish all of you the best in your relationships. If you're going through marital discord, we offer free consultations. You can go to the Amen Clinic, get testing done, look at what's available. Don't throw that marriage that you've had away because you're not dealing with the issues. Get help first. If you need a divorce, we're there to support you through that, but it's not the first option. You have to go through a different process. So thank you so much for taking the time, and what a great message to the community.
Thank you.
Take care.